Welcome to Tow Haul. I'm Matt Harris, Systems Group Manager, and today I'd like to share with you a few tips on installing shock valves. If you're familiar with our control valves, our PVG 100s, you're probably familiar with the shock valve. This is the device that's inside that controls the pressure for each function of the valve. Over time, these tend to wear out, the springs lose a little bit of tension, and they need to be replaced. It's a pretty simple procedure, but there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. First and foremost, make sure that you have the proper shock valve for the application. Refer to your manual for the correct settings. To verify that, on top of the shock valve, you'll see that the number is listed on the top. Make sure that corresponds with the correct section on your drawing. Next, you need to make sure that the spring that attaches to the top fits snugly. We want to take it, insert it, and it should feel a little bit firm. If not, you can simply take some needle nose, crimp it just slightly, and make sure it fits. It should be able to be supported by itself. Next, for the installation, we'll want to move to the valve. Before we take anything apart, as always, we want to verify that there's no oil pressure on it. It's a good idea to plug in your gauge to one of your ports and verify we're at zero. To make sure for that work section, we can take a 9mm wrench, hook it to the manual actuator on the back side, and move it back and forth. It will relieve any pressure in the section. Next, we can take our wrench, it's 13mm, break the cap loose, and remove the intact shock valve. You'll notice this one has the spring still connected. The importance of installing this correctly is if it's not aligned straight, the little ears on the shock valve can be broke. So the way to install it, the way I like to do it, is to grab it by the spring with your index finger and thumb and simply insert it into the hole. Just letting it kind of glide itself into the recess there. It should be below the surface of the edge. Next comes your cap to reinstall. Stick it over, start to turn it in. This should turn freely with just your fingers. Shouldn't require any wrench to start with. If it does, stop immediately. Back it out, retry it. Sometimes you'll run into a problem with the new caps like this, with the threads being a little misaligned and causes too much friction. So don't be afraid to reuse your old cap. It works fine. Take your wrench, turn the cap all the way in, give it a little bit of a snug, and you're good to go. Now, I installed that on the mechanical actuator side of the valve. That's the easiest. I've built this wrench just as a 13mm socket cut down, welded to a handle, and I did it so that you can reach in between the solenoid and the valve. It just speeds up the operation. If you don't have that, you can remove the 4 screws and take the solenoid assembly off and have free access to the plug. It works great either way. Thanks, and I hope these tips are helpful.